Today in Northern Revolutions, I'm going to talk about some OG 90s records. So stay tuned. Hey, Vinyl community, welcome to Northern Revolutions. I'm Rob. Welcome back if you're returning. Welcome if you're new. I did a video today that was inspired by my buddy, Concert Buddie. He posted a video today that I thought was great. He did a video where he talked about some 90s records, but not just 90s records that were actually pressed in the 90s. I love 90s music. I was a teenager in the early 90s, and that's when I got into music. So it's kind of got a soft spot for me. I've got a lot of 90s music in my collection, but a lot of it is either reissues or 90s albums that back in the 90s weren't pressed on vinyl. So they're modern pressings of 90s albums. But what we're going to focus on in this video, as Concert Buddie did, is a few albums that I personally really love from the 90s and that I have pressings of from the 90s. So let's get started. I'm going to start with, I think, the 90s band that was the most influential for me, and that's U2. And I'm actually going to show you the Holy Trinity, if you will. The first one is from 1991, and this is their masterpiece, Achtung Baby. One of their finest albums. Not my favorite U2 album, but certainly an absolute masterpiece. I bought this. This came out in 91, and I bought it in late 91 or very early 92 at a very famous record store on Yonge Street in Toronto called Sam the Record Man. I've mentioned Sam's before. It was an iconic musical institution. If you are a Canadian between the ages of 30 and 130, you've probably been to Sam the Record Man. It's no longer around, unfortunately, but if you go to Yonge and Dundas Square in Toronto, the original sign from Sam the Record Man, which is like 2 stories tall, it's 2 giant neon spinning records. The sign has actually been preserved as a historical landmark. It's on top of, I think it's one of the University of Toronto buildings. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. I bought this when it first came out in 91 or very, very early 92. I love this album. I mean, there's some amazing songs in here. I mean, one is brilliant, even better than The Real Thing, Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses, Mysterious Ways. Maybe my second favorite U2 album. So this is an original. It is as close to mint as you could possibly get. And up until recently, it was my regular playing copy. Now that I have the anniversary edition that's been remastered, I play that one. But I've played this album for 20 years. On the heels of Achtung Baby, U2 released Europa in 93. This is an original 1993 pressing. It is mint. I have played it once. I hate this album. Do I like any song on here? Stay Far Away So Close. The rest, no, couldn't care less. But because I love U2 and I'm a bit of a completist with the bands that I love, of course, I have to have this. I did not buy it when it first came out. I bought it years later, but it's a mint 1993 Zeropa. And lastly, U2's Pop. This came out in, I want to say, 1997. I remember at the time I was dating a girl who was a massive U2 fan. And I played this album a lot. And I remember I had a few video bootlegs of a few of the different concerts on the Pop Mart tour. Not a giant fan of this album. There's a few songs in here I like. Staring at the Sun, Last Night on Earth, God Will Send His Angels. I don't even mind Discotheque. But, I mean, this is it's a very interesting album. But for the sort of soundtrack of my life spot that this occupies, it's pretty important. So this is an original pressing as well from 97. It's a little worn, but still in great shape. And more importantly, the records are flawless and play wonderful. So from U2 to the other band that was huge for me in the 90s. I never got into the Seattle grunge scene. I never got into, Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. And it was just not my thing. I respect how important all those bands are. Not my thing. But what I did love was a little bit of British rock. I don't get this Brit pop thing. I don't get the comparison to Blur. Blur I can see being pop. These guys are not pop. They're rock and roll. So I never understood the Brit pop war. Nevertheless, I loved Oasis. Was one of the first contemporary bands that I discovered on my own. It wasn't an influence from, my dad or somebody else. I've mentioned many times that What's the Story Morning Glory is one of the most important albums in my life. And if I'm stranded on a desert island, I have to have it. I have all Oasis albums on vinyl. They're all the remasters, except this one. This is an original 1997 UK pressing. The original 90s pressings of the first Oasis albums are A, hard to find, and B, crazy expensive. So I'm lucky that I picked this up. I don't think I got it in 97. I think I got it a few years later, but nevertheless, it's an OG. I like Be Here Now. A lot of people don't. A lot of people think that it's an overproduced, needless extravaganza. There's a tremendous amount of production in this relative to some of their other stuff. I mean, there's tracks in here that allegedly have 60 guitar tracks on the same song. I think that's a little overkill. But nonetheless, I like this album. Do you know what I mean? Big Mouth, Magic Pie, Stand By Me, Girl in the Dirty Shirt, All Around the World. I love this album. Fantastic record. So I wish I had an OG pressing of Definitely Maybe or What's the Story Morning Glory. Maybe someday. Doubtful because of the price and the rarity. But I would be remiss if I didn't throw a little CanCon in my video. Bryan Adams. The Bryan Adams fan. Fellow Canadian from Kingston, Ontario, though he lives in, I believe, London, England. This is his album from 1996, 18 Till I Die. I actually really like this record. He said some great albums and he said some stinkers, but this is a pretty damn enjoyable record. I remember when this came out in 96, having not heard anything from him since, I guess, Waking Up the Neighbors in about 91, and I saw the video for, I think it was The Only Thing That Looks Good on Me Is You, and I'm like, holy crap, where's Bryan been? But anyway, this is the one and only time I have ever seen this on vinyl. Really hard to find, pretty expensive. I think I grabbed this off of eBay about probably 15 years ago. So, an OG 18 Till I Die. And like Concert Buddy did, I'm going to throw a little wild card in here at the end. This is not what you would think of when you think of 90s music. However, this is Paul McCartney's Flaming Pie. This is his solo record that came out in also 1997. This just saw a anniversary release a few years ago. And the OG pressings are actually quite expensive. I remember I bought this. There used to be a small music store in the town that I live in. It was called Music in Orbit, and it was just on this little side street off of the main square in the town that I live in. And I used to go there a lot. I used to bug out of school early and walk downtown and go to the record store. And I remember at that time I was, trying to round out my Beatles collection. And when I saw this as a new vinyl, I'm like, I'll grab it. It's Paul McCartney and he's a Beatle. Interesting side note, Flaming Pie comes from a dream that Paul McCartney had, where he says he was dreaming and a man on a flaming pie wrote in and said, "You shall be known as Beatles with an A." And I guess that's where the name Beatles came from. So he wrote a song called Flaming Pie and put it on an album called Flaming Pie. So this is an OG version of Flaming Pie. They're hard to find because they did not press very many of them back then. And now that the anniversary edition has come out, people are looking for these. So go everyone, just a quick one, just following on a thread from Concert Buddie. I'll link to his video in the description. Please check him out. Please support his channel, one of my absolute favorite channels in the VC. Few people make videos as good and as entertaining as he does. So that's everything for me today, everybody. Thank you for watching. Catch you on the flip side. Bye.